I gave a presentation not that long ago about how do you deal with really hot climate in Texas if you want to have a garden. And we built a raised bed garden that is self-irrigating. And one of the things we're finding is that if you want to keep a raised bed garden going, you need to provide some other ways to fertilize it and break up the soil. And so I'm going to give a little presentation on my latest friends that I've got here joining me. I just, guess the day before yesterday, got a bunch of European night crawlers. And night crawlers are a worm, a big worm. And they are used to aerate the garden and allow, when you aerate, you're tunneling through the soil, and it allows water to go down into the soil. And so it's a natural way of letting your planting area for your vegetable garden to be more aerated. And this is what is happening here, is that the worms get down in the soil, they dig around, and they leave worm poop. And hey, it's like the best fertilizer you can get. And so what we're doing is we put in 500 worms, and in a 12 by 4 foot raised bed garden. So roughly, it was something like 96 square feet, cubic feet in there that we have. And so there it is. You see, this is the long axis and the 4 foot wide. And in here is where we have, this is a self-irrigating planter, meaning I've got a sprinkler system adding into it, but the bottom layer of this thing, the bottom board that you see down there, underneath or in there are tubes, big pipes, like 4-inch diameter pipes. And this box holds 85 gallons of water. And the reason you do that is because if you live in Texas in July and August, you'd have to water your garden 3 times a day to keep it alive. And this is a way that it maintains itself. You don't have to do anything. But we wanted to add worms to it so that they would break up the soil and allow more moisture to get, move in both directions in there. And so I ordered some worms from a place in Pennsylvania. You see Perishable on the FedEx box here. And they came and just...
The holes punched in it?
Yeah, it has holes punched in it. And it came from this vendor. It's Uncle Jim's Worm Farm. And notice the, red European night crawlers, like they're, I don't know, something exotic, but they're not. They look like regular worms, but they were pretty cool to get. And they came in this bag. There was just like dried peat moss in there. To put this in perspective, what you see here is a regular red wiggler worm, and this is the European nightcrawler worm. It's much, much bigger, much, it's probably 3 or 4 times as big, and kind of a fun guy to have in your garden. When we opened the bag, it was dry peat moss, and these worms had been in there for 4 to 5 days with no food or water. So, I think how I'd be after 4 or 5 days with no food or water, I'd be pretty scrawny. So they said, put them in the area, put them in your planter area, give them some water, give them some food, and let them come back to life. And here I am holding a handful of them, and you can see these are just like garden, nice garden worms that are going to get bigger. You spread them around. You kind of like stir up the surface, and I used an edger tool, and I just broke up the surface, and they put the worms in and spread them around. Here's some, by the different plants. I put a few, and then they all quickly ran down into the ground because they don't like sunlight, so they want to be underground. So they quickly did that. And then this is what you feed your pets. You make a mix of about half a cup of whole wheat flour, half a cup of cornmeal, half a cup of oatmeal, and a 1/4 cup of this oyster shell material, which is like eggshells. And you put it in a blender and you grind it up and you sprinkle it on there. and that's what they eat, and they love it. So, I mean, this is a great way to have, have your worms being fed and you're taken care of and whatever else. And in effect, that's the presentation on there. I'll let you read. The worms crawl in, the worms crawl out. The worms let your garden survive a drought. So there you go. Is that bad enough? Jack's bad poetry. So.
Let me see. There's a question. David, I'll write you about that. So does anybody have a question about the garden? Diane, Tom?
I have one, Kathleen, for Jack. How often do you have to feed the worms after the initial?
Well, like so many things, Tom, you don't want to overfeed them, but I think you start out by putting you're not making that much. You're making 2 cups. And you're sprinkling on, a 96 square foot area. And so you do it every day unless they're leaving some, meaning, okay, then I'd shift it back to every other day. But, this is something we'll learn over time. Maybe in the winter they eat less. I don't know. We're going to see on that. But right now it's, you feed them a little, as I said, 2 cups of this powder once a day.
So this is kind of like a cooperative venture. You feed the worms and they take care of the garden.
That's right.
The whole growing season, right?
Yeah, they do. They live in there. They aerate. They fertilize. They do all the hard work for you. So the least you could do is feed them a little cornmeal. So that's why I look at it.
So now we don't have like a dog or a cat, but now when Jack goes out of town, I now have to feed 3 groups of fish, 3 different containers, and now the garden. And then within the fish, I get to give frozen salmon to one of the fish from the Congo River, an Oscar fish, and I give zucchini to the plecostomus, which are the bottom ones that eat scum. So, and now I'm going to be giving cornmeal to the worms. So.
But we also have an outdoor pond, which is then you use the water from the outdoor pond to put onto the worms because it doesn't have chlorine in it. So dechlorinated fish water goes to the worms. So everybody's happy. Everybody's, in balance.
Oh, Kathleen is happy.
What?
Oh, you are happy.
Yeah.